possibilities or the natural possibilities or something or whatever, right, are like much smaller. Um, and on the other hand, I think that
Well,
whatever the
with
moral facts
mathematics,
are.
take for example field equations, right? Uh, you they predicted singularities 1 to 2 centuries before they were actually empirically verified. So not 1 to 2 centuries, like a long time. And then even with his ideas, from pure mathematics alone, he was able to deduce something called the cosmological constant. And the cosmological constant was treated to be this mathematical abstraction contemptuously often, but then later down they figured out that it was real and that the universe is expanding, right? Cosmological constant was trying to say that the
But
universe expands and gets bigger. But morality same doesn't seem to have the same predictive power to how reality is and also you can talk about how in mathematics and logic there seems to be like at least a good consensus of what's true, but morality seems to be kind of all over the place with people disagreeing on fundamental moral facts, whereas in mathematics, though there's many different foundations that have CP and axioms, they seem to have some kind of similar convergence or foundation, even though their specifics might differ. Morality does not have this.
okay, so to your first point, real quick, I don't think that, just through the mathematical truths, right? The things that are like, true, like their theorems of say like, ZFC set theory or something, and then like, you do the right translation to whatever mathematical theory you're working in, right? I don't think any of those are going to tell us anything about the natural world. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, it's gonna start with Sophie. This is the closing. 2 minutes. I mean, all right. You can start and start the timer when you say your first word.
all right, so the mathematical truths don't tell us anything about the natural world, but maybe if we supplement, the mathematical truths with some postulates about, the natural world, or some things we already know about the natural world, then yes, we can, arrive at predictions about the natural world, that are good for us. Um, that being said, though, I also don't think that like just because, moral truths don't predict anything about the natural world, that we should be skeptical about them. I mean, for one thing, they might predict something about the natural world. I'll be neutral about that. But even if they don't, um, I think that there's no conflict, right? And I think that a sort of naturalism, which is so thoroughgoing as to say that as if it doesn't make any predictions about the natural world, then we shouldn't talk about it. Overgenerates. It means we can't talk about metaphysics. We can't talk about epistemology. We can't talk about lots of things. That
It's true.
clearly are very important to us and that we can seem to disagree about, that even scientists disagree about. I mean, scientists have metaphysical disagreements about the interpretations of quantum mechanics, right? It's under the guise of theoretical physics, but ultimately they're doing metaphysics. The second thing I want to say is that I don't think disagreement is all that bad, especially when we're talking about uh, you know, uh, ethics, because all other fields of philosophy are rife with disagreement, and we don't criticize them so much for that. Nobody can give me, an uncontroversial example of a metaphysical truth, probably, or like a truth in logic, even, right? But that doesn't mean that there aren't objective facts of the matter about, whether, say, like, there are, composite objects or yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. So,
I can, yeah. So, point,
all right.
my
Would
first,
you?
wait, yeah.
Oh, wait. I have to start timer. So start
Yeah,
out
yeah.
your first word. Ready, set, go. You go.
All right. So, first of all, you talk about how predictive, just because someone doesn't have predictive power, we shouldn't talk about it. That's not my claim whatsoever. My claim is that if it doesn't have any predictive power about reality, then it means it's probably not substantiated within reality. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it. I mean, ethical discussions can give us emotional relief. It can help us as functioning beings within a social context. But the leap would be, okay, go from that and say that they exist objectively in any non-trivial sense. Another point about disagreement with in logic, physics. My idea is that disagreement within the foundations probably points to the idea that it's not substantiated within reality. Because if something exists fundamentally in reality, then people are discovering it. If people are discovering it, then it means that there's probably going to be a large sense of consensus in its fundamental axioms or fundamental postulates. But obviously, the specifics are more likely to be, say, disagreed upon. So because of this fundamental disagreement on the foundation of ethics, it seems to me that they don't exist fundamentally in reality, but we can say that they are a useful tool to help us manage societies, to help us with our thought, with our thought making and choosing our decisions. And yeah, so that's I'm done. I can give up.
Okay, so you and then stop timer.
Stop making it.
All right, so now it's time for Kyle to give his verdict and then some feedback.
I have a hard task ahead of me. I think this was a very lovely debate. I think you both did a fantastic job here. So it makes it that you've made my job difficult by giving me a very enjoyable, interesting debate to listen to, which I suppose is a nice problem to have. I think I'm going to give a very slight edge to Rudra in this debate, but I want to flag that it is extremely close. As for some small amount of feedback for both of you, I'll start with Sophie. Sophie, very nice work outlining exactly what proposition you're defending. I think that was really helpful and made it very clear what exactly was at issue. In the very beginning, there was a lot going on. You talked about compositional semantics. You talked about modal, agentive, and objective and the metaphysical modals and some other, and brought credence at the very end, and whether credences need to negation and not negation of propositions need to sum to one. There's just a lot going on in that. I thought maybe some more of that was going to come up in the debate, but then we didn't get anything about like compositional semantics or modals or things like that. So maybe that was like either too much in the beginning, or I would have liked to see more on the follow-up there. But I mean, great handle on that. Rudra, I think two things. One is that it would have been helpful, I think, for especially framing the debate and pushing the debate forward for your initial opening. It felt to me a little bit more like just sort of a statement of the general like anti-realist position, which is a little bit tricky here because the anti-realist position is basically just like moral realism isn't true. Is basically like, I mean, there's lots of anti-realist camps within that, but like the general thing that everyone agrees on if you're an anti-realist isn't true. And I didn't really get a sense of what your argument was for that beyond just like, well, I'm an anti-realist, I'm planting my flag. So I think that would have been really helpful for like framing the debate and pushing the debate further a little bit more, to have spent just a little bit more time there motivating what the position is. It was the first thing that I wanted to mention. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention was that, and maybe this is more a general point, like I felt like we were going around quite a bit in the Q&A about, or sorry, the cross-examination about truths relative to a system and truths that are that stand outside of our what do I want to say here, system agnostic or something like that. And it would have been nice, I think, to try and put that point down and then maybe like flag it and move on, just because I felt like we went a lot around and around about truths in a system versus truths that are agnostic to a system. So it would have been nice, I think, to cover some other points. So thank you both very much. This was a wonderful, wonderful debate.
Thank you.
All right, okay. Thank you guys. Thank you, Kyle. I'm gonna drop you guys down, and then can the next group of people, which is Dumas and Carl Sagan, I think that's like your Discord names. Raise your hand. All right, okay. You guys did. I'm gonna invite you both. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, hello.
Yep.
Hi, this
Hello,
is
what's
Luke.
up?
So, David, you're Dumas, right?
Yep.
No,
Oh, David's Carl Sagan.
Yeah, I'm Carl Sagan. All right.
Okay, and then Luke. Okay, so armor is gonna be Luke, right? Dumas. And so are you guys both ready?
I am not
Yep.
the affirmer.
I'm
Or
ready.
you're not? Okay.
Yep.
Who's your? Let me see. Oh yeah, okay, it is David. Okay, Carl Sagan. Okay, so if you guys are both ready, I'll put the timer, and it starts on your first word, David.
All right. Okay, so first off, I'm going to be defining moral realism as the theory that moral judgments enjoy a special kind of moral objectivity, such as judgments where such as true judgments, are so independently of what any human being anywhere in any circumstances think of them. Okay? So some might argue, my opponent might argue that morality depends on the cultures of other people. But my understanding is that this only shows that humans are imperfect in understanding what moral facts are, not that moral facts themselves are wrong. Right? You can have various groups disagree about science, but that doesn't necessarily mean that science is an objective. So now I'm going to get to my syllogism for why I believe moral realism is true. So I'm going to be using an argument from none other than Terence Cuneo, who is a doctorate in philosophy. And he gives this syllogism very nicely. It is called the argument from epistemic realism. Premise 1 states, if moral facts do not exist, epistemic facts do not exist. Epistemic facts exist, conclusion, moral facts do exist. Okay, so over here, epistemic facts refer to epistemic duties. So for example, when I'm engaging in a dialogue with my competitor, I would believe that he ought not to be dishonest and he ought not to misrepresent me. And my opponent, the same for me, right? So why ought not to if everything is relative? If there's no if there's no uh, if there's no pragmatic value in epistemic duties, then why should we value uh, reason and truth if they're not true, independent of what anyone thinks, right? So, in the same way that moral facts function, epistemic duties and moral facts actually function in very similar ways, right? It's difficult to distinguish them. So, if my opponent allows for epistemic facts to exist, then he has to give a huge probability to the existence of moral facts. And therefore, if moral facts do exist, then moral realism does exist. Moralism is true, right? Especially for skeptics when they are prescribing epistemic odds, whilst rejecting moral odds, even though the two are almost identical in operation. So that's my argument in favor of moralism. All right.
All right, okay, thank you. Mute you, and then I'll unmute Luke. All right, okay, give me a couple seconds to reset the timer.
Yeah.
All right, okay, it's set. On your first word.
Okay, so it seems like we have the same definition for moral realism, which is great. Although in our in the next section, I will ask for your definition of moral fact. But I will cover both bases for moral realism already, or like a morally realistic fact already explaining or existing in humanity, and then we'll cover my grounds for like a morally realistic fact, or yes, a more realistic fact should be. What am I saying? Anyways, okay. So assuming that morally realistic facts should be explaining some morals, or like are the explanation for why morals exist. The problem is that you can kind of say that for anything. Like you can kind of say that any rule exists and it's a physical rule that is separate from human belief, but you can't like confirm its existence. I like examples, so I will use an example for this. Like I can say that there's a rule that you are not allowed to eat before 1 p.m. Like this rule does not have any impact on humanity. There's no benefit to eating before or after 1 p.m. Like it doesn't matter. But I can claim that this is a universal rule of some sort that is independent of human belief, and its validity as a moral rule. It's just completely independent of human belief. So you can just make up any rule like this and claim it exists without proof because it has no observable impact on just anything around us. So how can you claim it exists? And if it's the case that humans already follow this moral rule that is independent of human belief, which I don't think is the case, but that's a slightly different argument. How can we draw the line that it exists? Like, how can we draw the line that this moral rule magically exists objectively and independently of human influence? It's essentially just making an observation and explaining this phenomenon with data that we literally cannot gather. So here's just another example. Like in science, we can make the explanation that salmon swim upstream. Like that is an observation we can make. They do that once in their lifetime, and through science, like we figured out that they do that to lay eggs. Like that's where they spawn. We could either do this, or we could say that like there's some ethereal salmon king that commands his salmon to swim up to their birthplace like once in their lifetime, so they can praise him or something. And we can like never confirm this position because we don't have the data to conclude that it's the case. And this is the same thing with morally realistic morals. We can't say that like there's like some objective human independent set of morals, or even just one.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. But yeah, that's time for the openers, and so now we'll move on to examination. It's 5 minutes. David, on your
Yep.
first word, it's your time to ask questions.
All right, I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay, on your first word.
Okay, so earlier on, you said that moral facts, if I'm representing you correctly, you said moral facts are like rules that exist independently of any human thought. Like you can't eat after 10 p.m. and therefore, I believe what you're saying is that they're not true fact. Are you saying that they're kind of redundant in that sense? In respect, just to clarify.
I'm saying that a moral fact, yes, the first part was correct. That a moral fact is some objective truth separate from humanity. Yeah, like that's my definition.
Okay, so and you're saying that the reason why it isn't the case that moral realism is probable is because moral facts are just like these rules that are separate from reality and do not have any observable impact. So I've just got a question. Are you associating the true value of moral realism? Are you associating that with the observable impact that it gives?
Well, that was part of my opening statement. I both accounted for it already. I accounted for it influencing our world and it not influencing our world. So in the case that it does influence our world, you can't draw the line for any moral belief and say that it is objective and human independent when there is a perfectly good explanation for why it is not. Like it's just explaining something without having the data to explain it. Like it doesn't make sense.
Okay, but have you considered? Are you familiar with? Are you familiar with moral realism, but except in the domain of naturalism? So, like, you can observe the facts of, say, when something is bad by a measure of pain.
Repeat the last part one more time.
Right. So I'm wondering if you're familiar with moral naturalism, which is part of moral realism, and in a sense, it's the way we categorize things is that if you experience pain or suffering or any kind of thing that really does have an observable impact, we affirm that those emotions are not emotions, but those negative experiences are identical to a moral fact such as evil or such as evil. Right.
Yes, I am aware what. Yeah, so for naturalistic moral realism, the issue with bringing it up here is that it's just changing the definition of moral realism from what it is or what we agreed upon initially to something different because it states that moral facts are the same as natural facts or just like observable physical things, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so the issue is like using naturalistic moral realism instead of more like just moral realism, what the original or like what we agreed upon, like we agreed upon that definition. That's just like something different. So I would argue if you're arguing for naturalistic moral realism, I would say it's just not the same thing.
As in, I'm saying that regardless of wherever there are humans, right? Even if you do not have humans, even if you do not have humans in this world, when I say mind independent, I mean like even if you do not have humans in this world, you can still have natural moral evils, right? Like animal suffering that can occur even without any humans around. So in that respect, it's still mind independent. And let's even grant the premise that okay, humans don't exist, right? There's still a possible world out there, which is definitely mind independent. Uh, there will always be a possible world where there are humans who are actively suffering, who are actively experiencing pain, whether or not there is a mind to conceive of that world, right? So in that respect, you can still have you can very much still have moral facts which are objective, mind independent, and it can still be naturalistic moral realism, right? But this is just yeah.
Okay. So it seems like our definition of moral, of what a moral is, seems to be changing a little bit here with this argument. Can you define moral for me?
Moral facts or moral realism,
Like, just like what is a moral? Like, what is that?
like what ought to be done, like what ought to be done. Yeah.
What ought to, like in terms of like ethics, or like in terms of like, because it seems like you're saying that a moral is something that ought to be done for the survivability or pleasure of a certain creature. Like when you said like an animal is suffering, like from your perspective, that would be bad because it's violating
What ought to be
their.
towards flourishing.
Okay.
Okay, that's time. So now it's gonna be 5 minutes for Luke to ask questions. Since it's like your time, try to stand your ground. So if you're done asking a question, that's fine. So on your first word after the timer.
I'll just start. I'll just pick up from where I left off there.
Yeah, sure.
So you said your definition of a moral is anything that is it a rule. State it again, please.
Like okay, virtues that ought to be oriented towards flourishing.
Okay, so in the example you used, where you said bad exists and is objective because it impedes an animal's ability to flourish, right?
Yeah.
So the issue with that is, again, we're just using slightly different definitions of moral, where the definition of moral that is used in moral realism is a moral refers to a belief about what is right and wrong in human behavior relating to ethics. So like, is this ethically correct or is this ethically incorrect? Like that's what the definition is. But the definition of moral from a naturalistic standpoint would be exactly what you said. It's like something that impedes something, or anything that's good impedes something's ability to survive. Anything that's bad impedes something's ability to survive, or whatever goal it is. Like you can assign whatever goal. So when you assign a goal like that, and that's how you define the goal, then yeah, sure, like good and bad objectively exists. But that's not what we're arguing. We're arguing for if like morals objectively exist and are independent. It's two different things.
Yeah, and I think my position here would be then that the morals do exist in the thing itself.
And what do you mean in the thing itself? Do you mean relative to humanity, or like relative to a group of people?
As in when you have living creatures that are capable of experiencing suffering, and in that experience of suffering itself, there's an essential property of evil, right? Whenever there is that specific fundamental thing that we call the act of suffering, be it in animals or be it in humans, it is identified as evil. So in that sense, I'm saying that thing in itself really does exist, right? It really does exist.
Okay. Why? And before you continue, I'm just gonna say, like, you're drawing the line that because like suffering is evil, like that's if I'm not mistaken, that's what you're saying. But we're assuming that like there are objective boxes for good and bad in terms of morality, like that those exist, and like I just don't think that we can claim that. Like,
I mean, okay, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, it would be very intuitive for someone to associate suffering with evil, it's not at all counterintuitive, right? So what I'd say here is that because it's not, you wouldn't go up to, when you ask a regular person on the sidewalk or on the street, is it evil to do evil moral act one? They're gonna say, no, it's not, right? It's not good to do that. But of course, you can go around this and say, oh, if I ask this other culture A, culture B, whether or not it's wrong to do this evil moral act, the culture can very well agree with it. But most of the time, like, okay, I'm going a bit off the rails here, but most of the time, when these cultures like affirm moral evil acts, it's usually because of factual errors that they translate into the ethical frameworks. So, for example, there's a tribe in Africa. You can go search this up. They believe that deformed children are have evil spirits in them, and therefore, unfortunately, they unalive them. Right? But this is obviously a clear example in which uh, non-factual information is translated into ethical systems, and as a result, they're ethically erroneous. If you can convince them otherwise, though, then they would change their morals. My point being that ethics is the ethics when you associate suffering with evil. That is very intuitive, and it's the burden of proof is on the skeptic to show that our intuitions are wrong. Right? That's my position.
Okay, well, we don't have too much time left, but
Yeah.
what I would like to talk about next is I think there's a line here that we're out of time. Whatever.
Okay, thank you for ending on time. So you guys can just pick up where you left off. I'm gonna add 10 minutes. You can start whenever.
Okay.
Open discussion.
All right.
But the argument you're making with this it assumes that all these morals that you're talking about, they're all relative to humanity. Like with the belief that deformed children have evil spirits inside of them. Like, can you draw the line one more time? You said that exists, and therefore what? Like, people have morals, and people have seemingly incorrect moral beliefs relative to other cultures. Therefore what? Continue your conclusion.
People have seemingly different moral beliefs relative to other cultures, and I was speaking specifically about the fact that the reasons behind these moral beliefs lie in the fact that they're motivated by factual errors, right? So if you hear an African tribesman, not trying to be stereotypical here, but if you hear such a person say, uh, you know, my deformed child is deformed because he has evil spirits inside of him, you know that he's factually erroneous, right? And that he ends up like initiating suffering on the child, and that's morally evil, right? But if you're able to convince him otherwise, that that factual that he has some factual error in his thinking, then he's gonna see how his actions are wrong, right? And intuitively, if you do that, uh, everybody's intuitions, if you convince them and you compel them enough to get their facts straight, everybody's intuitions is going to be one where most of them, at least I'm going to say most of them, are going to be in favor of uh more of they're going to be on a consensus on agreeing what is right or wrong. In that what is right is to inflict suffering, which is unnecessary. Because in the case of that person, right, he's inflicting suffering because he thinks that that thing is very evil in itself, when really there's no such thing as evil spirits in that child. And the suffering he's inflicting is itself evil.
Okay, we're talking about something slightly different again. Like the original argument for moral realism was that there is like at least one, let's say like at least one moral truth that is independent of humans and it's independent of human culture. And I don't think saying that like because humans can have quote unquote incorrect beliefs that are evil. And by the way, when you say evil, like it's from like a human perspective. There's no objective box for evil and good, right? Like that's the whole thing that I'm arguing, is that there's no like objective, mythical, human independent, ethereal box for good and evil. And your argument assumes that there is.
Yep.
Well, your argument assumes that there is for humanity, which, like, sure, you can like categorize good and bad for humanity. Like that's what moral theories do, like utilitarianism, deontology, stuff like that. But when we do that stuff, we can't then draw the line and say these are completely human independent and objective, because like they are human dependent. Like that's what they're based off of. That's why we have the theories.
Yeah, so to that I just say that just because moral actions occur between humans, just because they manifest in actions, does not mean that they're made up. And you have a lot of things that we manifest in actions that
Can I
aren't.
interrupt you?
Yeah, sure.
I'm not saying that they're not made. Like they are. I'm saying that they are made up, but they are made up by humanity, and that's not what moral realism is talking about. If moral realism were saying that morals exist relative to humanity and is dependent on culture, then I would agree with you. But that's not what moral realism is. Like the issue is that it's completely independent. I'm not saying it's like made up. I'm not saying that morals are made up or the morals that we have, but I'm saying that moral realism claims that there is some objective box that I don't know, like we just haven't found yet or something. Like I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm getting to there. Like I'm saying that even though they only manifest in actions, uh my position is that they'd be true regardless, right? And I was going to say that there are many examples where we have things that uh manifest in human actions, like you're actively thinking about lots of things, right? You're actively thinking about the laws of logic, you're actively thinking about the laws of causality when you're uh and it's, even if you weren't here, right, these laws would still exist perfectly fine. And the same thing
Relative
can be
to
said for
humanity.
contracts. Sorry, what?
Well, again, that's the issue relative to humanity. Like if I didn't exist, like probably the same like moral truths would exist on our planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the case. But again, it's on our planet. Like it's like relative to humanity. Moral realism is saying not relative to humanity, objective, ethereal, eternal.
So
Like
in other
I,
words, you mean like not just a contingent fact in a sense.
what do you mean not just a contingent fact?
Like when you say it wouldn't otherwise exist in this world, could you like elaborate on that?
That's not what I said. I'm confused.
Oh, then could you repeat what you said and clarify that? Because
I said, well, if I'm being honest, I'm more or less restating the same point. That moral realism is independent of human culture, and every example that you bring up is of some morals that are true relative to human culture, which is not what moral realism is saying. Like I'm just saying that.
right,
And
but
anytime you bring up ethics or like, yeah, anytime you bring up these examples of of human ethics and being incorrect or having incorrect/correct morals, quote unquote.
okay,
Which,
right.
like,
So
yeah.
in other words, your position is that because they only manifest in human cultures, like the idea of moralism, uh, what we ought to do, the things, all these things, right? That therefore they don't exist independently, right? But is that correct? Just yes or no.
Yes, we cannot confirm that they exist independently of humanity, and that they're, yeah.
Okay, then I guess I would ask, what do you count as existing independently of humanity? Like, what's your criteria for that?
Um, that's a good question. So, like, that's kind of the thing is that, like, I don't know if a moral can exist independent of humanity. Like, when we picture moral realism, you have to imagine some it's like a magical rule floating in the sky or something. Like that's exactly why I'm arguing that like it probably doesn't exist Like it's something that we cannot collect data to confirm its existence. We cannot collect data to not confirm its existence. It's the same thing as radical skepticism. So why can, like, when we have perfectly good explanations for why people develop morals, why would we turn to something that we just can't explain at all?
Well, I find that a little bit inconsistent because when you talk about collecting data, I mean, that itself relies on human actions, right? Actively, like recording things with your five senses. These are all human senses that are very relative to human culture, and it's not something that you can separate if you're going to affirm that moral realism is not mind independent because of these same reasons.
You're gonna have to draw that line for me. People use their senses to collect data. Therefore, what?
People use their senses to collect data. Therefore, data is relative to human culture and customs because the action of collecting data it's very much based on human ideas, human practices, all these things that is very much cultures that we've developed, scientific cultures, all these. No, I'm not trying to speak of tradition as in like some kind of tradition that is passed down from generation to generation, but obviously it's still a generation in the sense that it's a common practice among humans. And if humans weren't here, you wouldn't have any scientists going around collecting data, right? Same for moral realism. Even if humans weren't here, it could very much still exist.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're saying humanity can collect data that only humanity can collect, and then
Yeah.
you're drawing the line that therefore morally realistic morals exist that are independent of.
Yeah, because otherwise you'd have to. Otherwise, you have the view that human collecting
Okay,
data.
sorry. With that, stop. I don't want to like the last full time's up. Okay, so now it's the closing statements, 2 minutes each. Starts with the affirmative. So you, David, and then you can start at any time.
Right. So
This
right. So I guess I wasn't able to finish what I said, but I'm just going to finish it up really briefly here. Right. What I wanted to say was just that, oh, you know, if everything's just based on humans, that's your qualifier for what counts as something that is not not mind independent, then even science comes under conflict because that's mind dependent. Everything you do, the information you collect, the data you collect, all of that depends on your mind and how your mind interprets that data, right? As well as the values. All these are human instruments. Okay, so that's my finish. I guess it was really nice talking to you. I apologize. I profusely apologize for confusing your positions so many times. Um,
Okay.
but I think I learned quite a fair bit. But yeah, it was nice talking to you. I guess I did get confused in some points. I was very rash. I could have brushed up on some of my preparation, but besides that, I enjoyed talking to you. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna mute you real quick, and then I'm gonna unmute Luke. All right. Okay. You have 2 minutes. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so this argument it more or less just goes between like one or two definitions that are disagreed upon by both sides. And in this case, the last line that was drawn during your closing statement was that your mind, well, the line wasn't finished, but it was your well, I can't straw man you. It was you just said your mind does stuff and we collect data, and I'm not I don't know how that relates to moral realism existing. Like yeah, like you can collect data using your mind and all that stuff is like human dependent. Like you have to be a human to collect human data and see human world. But I think it's not correct to try to explain a phenomenon like morals and why we have them through. Again, I'm pretty much just saying the same thing over and over, which is of no fault to you, Mr. Carl Sagan. But it's just that we can't like it's it's inefficient to explain something using a conclusion that has data we can't collect. Like it's improbable. And understanding why we get morals in the first place also helps us understand that it's just like not the case, and we can't confirm that it's ever the case. So we should explain using data we can actually collect. And that's it. I'm done.
All right, okay, thank you. I'll meet you both, Luke and David. Thank you, guys. And so now it's time for Kyle to give his verdict and feedback.
Great, thanks. Once again, a very nice debate. Thank you both for that. I am going to give the edge here to David, I believe is your name, Mr. Carl Sagan. Though again, a very nice debate. Bit of feedback for both of you. I'll start again with David. David, so two quick things from me. One is that in your opening statement, you mentioned a sort of like particular syllogism that you were relying on. I can't remember all of the details of that syllogism in my head right now, but I believe it made some kind of connection to the existence of moral facts with the putative existence of like epistemic facts or objective epistemic normativity or something like this. That's fine. No issues with the argument itself, but then I didn't really feel like that played any role in the subsequent arguments to follow, so I maybe would have expected that to show up more as part of your positive case for moral realism. Second quick thing is you mentioned realism. It would have, or sorry, not real, naturalism, excuse me. And it would have been helpful, I think, just to have a quick example or idea of what you were talking about when you were talking about naturalism. Unsurprisingly, we're talking about moral realism, where there's contested definitions of what exactly that is. Naturalism, I think, can sometimes be in the about, so it would have just been nice to have an example of what you meant there. On to Luke. Luke, I think you did a really nice job with this. I think one thing that would have been helpful would have been to like push the particular line that David was taking a little bit more. David gave a particular like syllogism, for example, in the opening statement. I think it would have been nice to see some pressure on that particular syllogism because David seemed to frame the argument as one that hinged on that particular argument. I think it would have been nice to pressure that particular argument a little bit more. To I think like push this debate in a bit of a different direction. Nice work from both of you again, though. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, guys. The debaters, I'm gonna drop you guys down, and
Oh my gosh. How did
Luca and
How did I win
Nora,
that?
if you guys could raise your hand.
how did I win that? Okay, but you know what? It's fine. It's fine. All right. I won that somehow.